Inside, outside, USA. Dude, I actually love the Beach Boys. But listen, I want to talk to you about internal senses and external senses, or what I call interior design and exterior design. And I really want you to think about it like that, okay? Because Neville says that we must what? Downregulate or diminish the power of the external senses, right? And then amplify the internal senses. And this is actually told in the Bible as a metaphor. So there is Jesus Christ, who's the imagination, and then there's his cousin, John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist is the hairy man. Anytime you read anything about anybody being hairy in Scripture, it's calling out to the external self, the external man, the ego, the person with the name and the history, right? That's you, who you think you are. Okay, first things first though, the ego's not your enemy. I am not one of those people who we need ego to just die. No, we need to transmute what your ego is, because your ego is doing what it's supposed to do, right? Evolution gave us the ego to self-protect, okay? There's nothing wrong with protecting yourself. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable, right? But let me say it a different way. There's nothing wrong with having boundaries, right? And that might strike a chord for you. Maybe for you, you're like, oh man, I really needed to hear that because, sometimes I don't think that boundaries are good because I need to be vulnerable and open. And dude, I get it. I mean, as an extrovert, I'm pretty much addicted to vulnerability, right? And so I get it. I get the mentality behind it. But what I want you to hear is that even the Bible, which is an esoteric, not historical document, is saying, hey, I must decrease, meaning the outer man, the outer person, the outer self must decrease so that the inner self, or Christ, or the imagination, can increase. This is what he actually says, right? John says to his cousin Jesus, I must decrease so he can increase, okay? And that is ultimately what is being said esoterically about the senses. You must decrease the exterior senses, the exterior design, and increase the interior design, okay? Now let's talk about the senses for a second, and then I'm going to tell you why I call it design, because I think it's a much more powerful understanding and approach to the senses. Because when we think senses, all we think are the five senses, which are true, totally with that, right? And yet again, the Bible esoterically talks about this, right? David gets how many stones? 5 stones. That's a metaphor for the 5 senses, right? To go and attack the other giants, right? The brothers of Goliath. So again, and that's just a metaphor for big problems, big issues, big concerns, big worries, right? And we use the senses, but these are the internal senses. The same for the prodigal son, right? It's the story of what? A son who goes and squanders everything, and then what? This is a very, very powerful one-sentence thing. He comes to his senses, his internal senses. Why? Because then he turns to the Father, who is your consciousness, right? And so again, you can only meet the Father within, okay? You can obviously talk about him. You can talk about him theoretically, or her, or whatever gender you want this thing called consciousness to be. We can always talk about it philosophically and theoretically in the exterior, but to actually meet it and experience it and to become friends with it and to date it and to romance it, right? All of these metaphors for love, right? To love the Father, to love the consciousness, right, is to spend time with it and to honor it, right? But to do that, you have to go in. And so when Neville talks about the interior and the exterior senses, he's always talking about down-regulating it, meaning don't give it that much importance, but then up-regulate the interior, okay? And the reason why I love the idea of interior design is that if you've ever watched it, even one episode or 4 minutes of an interior design show, it's all about the detail. It's all about, ooh, look at this and the kinds of curtains there are and the carpet. And I'm not really into interior design, but I think it's a great metaphor to better understand what these senses are doing, right? So the senses that you're using are not just building your interior states akin to sleep or your scenes, right? Those are important, by the way. That's still equally important, and it's a powerful technique to get really good at. In fact, out of all the senses, Neville seems to argue that touch is the one that you really want to practice. Key point, by the way, because a lot of people, and even my clients, will say, well, how do I get good at this? Because I can't seem to imagine, or I can't seem to create scenes. Neville even said, this takes time. I mean, and this is the guy who really kind of originated this concept. Well, I mean, there are other people before him, but really he impacted the idea that Jesus Christ is the imagination, and he influenced a lot of it. And so the reason why it's important is because you have to recognize that your senses do create. But how do they create? Because remember, states are what actually create. But let me give you the model that Neville is actually explaining here, which I think will help you, and then we'll come back to the interior design at the end, okay? And which actually ends up being a tip for you. You know how I'm big on tips, not those kind. But again, back to this idea of how senses create, okay? So you have the senses, the 5 senses, right? Taste, touch, hear, feel, right? All those one. Okay, so I know I missed one there, but which one did I miss? Just let me know below. So again, those create, why? Because they create reason, okay? So you're seeing something in your world, and then you create a reason for why that thing exists, right? So even something as simple as a tree, you're like, well, that's evolution, or well, that's, God, or that's all mind, or that is, natural-based molecules coming together, and, particles, and all of these kind of things working together in this dance called perception. Whatever it is that you do, all of those are reasons. You've created reasons why things are the way they are. The same why you can't pay your bills. The same why your SP won't come back. The same why you can't seem to manifest your car. We're always creating reasons because the brain's main function is to do that. Your brain's main function is to create patterns, okay? And so even Neville says one of the greatest things that you could do is learn to revise those patterns, right? And so you are always creating patterns, okay? And so that is what your brain is functionally made to do. You can try to change it, but why not work with it, right? So don't see your brain as an enemy, okay? And I know a lot of people struggle with this because they do. They think, oh my gosh, I can't think this thought, or oh my gosh, I can't feel this feeling. And this is not what it's about. It's being and creating dominant states, which means bodies of belief. So essentially, this is what's happening. This is how you're creating from your senses. The senses create a relationship between what it's seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, feeling, and then it creates meaning out of this. Now, those meaning, if you consist and persist in them, you create assumptions, and those assumptions harden into fact. Yet another way of saying, hey, you keep believing this thing over time, it's going to become a perception, a way to see things, a way to judge things, even judge what's possible in your world, okay? And so that is ultimately what Neville is trying to get us to wake up to, okay? But then the same thing is happening with your interior or your inside senses. So when he says down-regulate, don't give them too much meaning here. Don't give them too much so much power that you actually down-regulate the inner senses, because that's where creation happens, right? That's where you're creating things for you and for yourself and for others, okay? And that's where you want to spend most of the time building out the muscle of using your senses. So when people say to me, well, I can't create, or I don't know how to create a scene, all you're doing is you're imagining that you have 5 senses inside. That's all you're doing. You already know how to use them on the outside, so why not use them on the inside, right? And again, you're creating reasons. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't things that you might struggle with. And I'm not saying that maybe you need to just hear. Sometimes hearing is enough. Even Neville actually answered someone's question, like, what if you struggle with imagination? And he said, well, use hearing, right? Because you can actually use someone's voice as a form of authority and power, right? Making you believe that this is actually happening. So again, now interior design, the reason why I like this and exterior design is for the very same reason why I just basically kind of showed you, right? Because your brain is creating correlative relationships, right? Or relationships between your senses and the world, okay? And so in interior design is you building in your world using these senses, and you're full on saying, okay, this is the world I want to experience in the shadow world in 3D, right? And so exterior design is the same thing, and you're doing it. You're doing it now. You're going to do it at the end of this video. You're going to do it tomorrow. You're going to do it next week, right? And so you're already doing this. So why not get good and take it as a challenge to be like, I want to be a mental interior designer. I want to get really good at using my senses. And yes, it takes time. It could take you 6 months. It could take you 1 month. It could take you a year, right? But it's persistence is the key, which means you got to keep going. You got to keep trying, try different techniques, right? And I'll actually end up doing a workshop on what some of these techniques are. But if you're looking for coaching in this area or any area, I specialize also helping people with mental health. And, I've studied human behavior for like 8 years, backed by my training in Harvard and so on and so forth. So get in touch if you're looking for coaching, and try this out. Try to build your interior world, because that's what you deserve. You deserve the best interior world that outpictures it into this world. And the better that you get at this, the more that the more energy and time that you spend at this, the more powerful you'll get. I promise you that.